Hello everyone, I welcome you all to the module 16 of the course of UN SDGs. This is about SDG 10, reduced inequalities. So in the line, if you see, now we have reached almost, we have covered almost half. Now we are entering into the second half, which talks about social issues, public issues, our society, community, and its overall well-being and functioning. Okay, so we have seen previously like industries, innovation, infrastructure. Now this is going to be about reduced inequalities, and then about more communities, sustainable cities and consumption, etc. in the next ones. So let's see this. We'll have a look of some facts and figures. Almost 2 in 10 people reported having personally experienced discrimination on at least one of the grounds established by the international human rights law. 1 in 10, 2 in 10, that's 20%, almost 1/5, of our society, this is at the world level, we are talking about, that they have experienced, every 5th person has experienced some form of discrimination, on some occasion, okay, which are, listed by international human rights laws, right? So we will see, eventually in the later course, what are those, discriminations, in what possible means it is possible. But typically we know, like, a discrimination is a kind of a mistreatment, or seeing somebody or treating somebody with some prejudiced or preconceived notions, which are based out of, maybe language, maybe color, maybe religion, ethnicity, tone, right, or maybe region, where you belong to, or maybe any other thing. Okay, so there may be like a variety of such a discriminatory parameters on which like somebody actually judges, or somebody actually measures out of that, right, and that ends up into a kind of like a mistreatment or maybe mishandling, or something like that. Like for example, if you see, there is like huge divide of like a so-called like a black and white races in the advanced country, like like United States of America, and we keep on seeing like a lot of examples on very soon, very often it actually it happens. Even this week itself, like something has happened, and the whole country is kind of talking about it. The whole world is actually talking about it. So this puts up a question, like this is such an advanced country, like so-called like advanced country, okay, with so much of advancement in science and technology, economy, GDP, like a economy running in billions and trillions of dollars, like so many Fortune 500 companies, and like so much of technology, and biggest like a military in the world, and all of those like things, and still at basic level like such kind of like mistreatments from one person to the another, right? So it puts everything into the question, like what kind of like a society that is. Okay, and the same goes anywhere and everywhere. It's not just like I think it's one place's problem or one country's problem. It's a problem in as a whole, right? So the whole world, if you see, like at many of the places, I know these actually numbers, like if you see, that's why like these numbers are essential. So if every 5th person has experienced like some sort of discrimination at some point of time, that means there is a problem, like a big problem, right? So the overall goal with this SDG, why we are discussing like this through this this SDG is important for us to understand. Okay, so what is the goal? To reduce inequalities within and among countries, in any form, right? In any form. If you see like a any such like a thing based on color, language, like a tone, right, or like ethnicity, religion, right, any of those things, like if you see, so one should actually like a break free of like a such like shackles, and move ahead with one like a frame of mind, because now I think compared to the like a previous older times, now this whole world is a one like a unit, is a one global village, right? And we are all like brothers and sisters, who are like sharing like resources, opportunities. We are working for each other, we are helping each other, and all of those things. Okay, so a place for like any form of inequality, definitely should not find a place in a civilized like a place in a civilized society, right? So that's like the overall target. Well, why this is needed? Inequality is based on income, sex, age, disability, sexual orientation, race, class, ethnicity, religion, and opportunity continue to persist across the world. So these are some like listed down over here. You can see the list. Okay. Inequality threatens long-term social and economic development, harms poverty reduction, and destroys people's sense of fulfillment and self-worth. So if you see, like if you discriminate or mistreat anybody based on any of these, okay, the person definitely is going to face maybe odd behavior or maybe reduced opportunity. For example, if some person was entitled for some like a benefit or opportunity, and if the person who is in charge or who is handling that thing is out of like a such inequality, is barring that person, that needy person from that opportunity, it's like the killing the whole future of that person, right? So this can actually harm in a small term as well as in a long term way also. Like for example, if you see, it threatens long term social and economic development, because the needy person might not going to get the benefit or that opportunity, and might not actually progress in his or her life, okay, which result into a long term, or for example whole like a life's deprivation, or maybe like a state of or low state of like affair, or low economic like a well-being, and things like that. Or even like a mental like a like a stigma and mental like a agony that the person actually goes through, right? So that is also an additional like this thing, which when a person actually like feels like mistreated or misbehaved, right, because of like a so and so kind of things, which the person has no authority or no capacity to change. Like who can change the where they were born, what ethnicity, what culture they were born in, what language like they are speaking, what is their mother tongue, what is their skin color, these things are not in our hand, right? So why to mistreat somebody because of like such things which like is nobody's capacity. Like what I have like born into, what you have born into, is very very unique and individual, right? So one should have like this respect for everyone. Okay, so that is the thing we are talking about. It kind of like hampers like one's like a self-respect and self-worth also. That also is a kind of like a problem, and that may lead into like an inferiority complex, or maybe depression, or maybe other like anxieties, or maybe like a loss of opportunities, etc etc. That is like to do with the like a psychological or mental well-being of the person, right? So if you see, this in turn can breed crime, disease, and environmental degradation. So by the loss of like that extended opportunity, it can result into anything. Well, it depends on that context, what was actually mistreated. For example, if somebody was debarred of availing health services, okay, that the person may going to experience that like a medical situation, right? And who knows like what may be the like a turn of events leading some complexity, or leading some maybe exaggeration of like that disease, or maybe even death, right? So yeah, this can actually lead into any kind of like a situation, right? So one must be very careful and cautious in not like doing like these things in any like a known or unknown ways. We cannot achieve sustainable development and make the planet better for all if people are excluded from the chance for a better life. Yeah, so this betterment, what we are talking, like through SDGs, like all of these SDGs, 17 SDGs, that target itself is going to get, like a question, or going to get into a, like a murky, like a situation if, like a such thing, like still exists in the society. right? And despite some positive sign, inequality is growing for more than 70% of the global population. Well, unfortunately, it looks like it appears as if it is increasing, exacerbating the risk of divisions and hampering economic and social development. Furthermore, COVID-19 is hitting the most vulnerable people the hardest, and those among same groups are often experiencing increased discrimination. Yeah, well, it was already bad, but this pandemic has further worsened like this situation, right? And a big number of people, if you see this number, like 70% of global population, is facing like some sort of like a this inequality wala like a treatments, right? So that's really like a disheartening to see this. Well, let's see some of the examples of inequality as per UN. Women and children with lack of access to healthcare die each day from preventable diseases such as measles, tuberculosis, or in childbirth. Okay, so these are some definitely treatable like medical conditions, like TB. It used to be a very deadly disease in the older times, but not anymore. It is it can be completely, the patient can be completely cured, and this disease can be completely like treated, right? And person can go back and live a normal life. Okay, so this is very much like a doable kind of like a medical condition, right? And any government like a medical facility, beginning from the primary health centers to the like big hospitals, wherever like you reach any of these hospitals, you can reach. And by government, I think they have like these free treatment and free medicine like facilities for TB patients, right? And even if people are not able to like get this because of inequality or because of some mistreatment or mishandling, that's like a terrible, unfortunate like a situation. And coming down to like a measles, yeah, another treatable disease, childbirth. Yeah, well, there are like efforts being made pan India, pan world. Okay, but still like we saw previously like how much of like a mortality rate is there in the like newborns under less than 1 year age, less than 2 years age, less than 5 years age, on for like expecting mothers or newly delivered like mothers also, because of the lack of like iron, like anemic situation we saw previously, and many other like proper nutrition in the food, right? And other like support systems, right? So that's a bad situation if it is happening because of like a reduced inequalities, right? It must not happen that way, because system, the government our society is able to provide like such things the support systems to these groups. Okay, and if because of the like a precaution notions of the people who are handling these facilities, if it is happening, then there's a most like a condemnable like a situation. Older persons, migrants and refugees face lack of opportunities and discrimination at work, maybe. Yeah, an issue that affects every country in the world. 1 in 5 persons reported being discriminated on at least one ground of discrimination prohibited by international human rights law. Yeah, so like if you're a migrant from like some country trying to settle down in some other country, okay, if there are discriminations, okay, so there's like already you are in a very miserable condition that you are a migrant, right? And if you are not being extended to the support systems, that's the kind of like adding and add on misery to the already miserable situations, right? So that must not actually happen. Among those with disabilities, 3 in 10 personally experience discrimination. Yeah, to the group of people who belong to the like a specially abled like a group. Okay, so they are also one of the groups who face like a challenges in everyday life, because like our infrastructure facilities and like things are not in compliance with the universal design, with the like a design for accessibility, right? So this becomes a terrible like a situation. Well, awareness is rising in the recent years, and if you visit public, like places such as railway stations, airports, and like bus stations. Okay, now infrastructures are being like improved and upgraded, to help like people from like any such disabilities. Okay, with higher levels still among women and disabilities, including based on religion, ethnicity, and sex, pointing to the urgent need for measures to tackle multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. Yeah, so in that too also, like the women and disabled, like people or elderly, they are the like most vulnerable. How do we tackle discrimination? In today's world, we are all interconnected. Problems and challenges like poverty, climate change, migration, or economic crisis are never just confined to one country or one region. Even the richest countries still have communities living in abject poverty. The oldest democracies still wrestle with racism, homophobia, and transphobia, and religious intolerance. Global inequality affects us all, no matter who we are or where we are from. Yeah. So at global level also, if you see, these challenges are happening, and the problem is that this is not one person's problem or one country's problem. If countries, if we start like behaving in a very discriminatory way, because sometimes it happens, if the country is like rich, okay, and if this country is not that rich, okay, so it is seen that like a discriminatory kind of an attitude towards this country, right? So that's happening at the systemic very big level, right, at country to country level. Okay, and that has potential that it may cause abject poverty to the entire like a country which is maybe in dire need of like a help, maybe financial, monetary, or like any such like a technological like help from like other countries, right? So this may push millions of people into like a further into poverty like a situation, because if it happens at like a country level, so you can see the effect. So this effect is not limited to just one person or one country, rather we all are like interconnected, because if this country fails on some region, okay, its neighbors and others are also going to get impacted, right? Perhaps the whole region might get impacted. Okay, if some kind of disease spreads, right, because of an abject poverty situation or bad health care facilities and things, okay, it might spread to the other places also, it might come to this country also, right, creating like a havoc and disastrous situation, right? So it is not one person's problem. If you see, this actually is a collective like issue and must be handled like a collectively. Can we achieve equality for everyone? Well, it can be and should be achieved to ensure a life of dignity for all. Political, economic, and social policies need to be universal and pay particular attention to the needs of disadvantaged and marginalized communities. Well, of course, it's perfectly doable, there is no question in that, but yeah, it must be done to help like everyone to like relieve themselves of like such a like agony. What can we do? Reducing inequality requires transformative change. Greater efforts are needed to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, and invest more in health, education, social protection, and decent jobs, especially for young people, migrants and refugees, and other vulnerable communities. So you see, like the like a group of like needy people, right? Vulnerable communities within countries. It is important to empower and promote inclusive social economic growth. We can ensure equal opportunity and reduce inequalities of income if we eliminate discriminatory laws, policies, and practices. So there may be some still like a discriminatory like rules, regulation like being practiced in some countries. For example, if you take like names of some of the like a Gulf countries, women do not have like voting rights, right? They cannot drive alone on the road, right? They cannot go to movies and cinema halls alone, right? And they are supposed to wear some particular kind of clothes all the time, right? So those are a few kind of like mistreatments, if you see, or maybe like early age, like a marriage, right? And marriage to the like elderly, like a male member and things like that. So those are still like discriminatory like rules, regulations. If these are not abolished like a completely, right, to now, for the like a betterment of women. If women are granted with their own choice, they should be allowed to like a walk and roam anywhere and wear whatever they want, right? And they should be able to go to schools and other educational like a facility. They should be able to choose their own careers and things like that. So because if these are there as a kind of law, so that means it's a systematic way of like a depriving them of their rights and like their own freedom, right? So that is not good. If it is happening at the systemic country level, then it must be kind of like a pulled it down. Because if you are claiming that we are in the 21st century with so much of advancement and things like that, well, definitely there is no place for any such discrimination, not just women, any other like a person from a race or different ethnicity among countries. We need to ensure that developing countries are better represented in decision making on global issues so that solutions can be more effective, credible and accountable. Yeah. Governments and other stakeholders can also promote safe, regular and responsible migration, including through planned and well-managed policies for the millions of people who have left their homes seeking better lives due to war, discrimination, poverty, lack of opportunity and other drivers of migration. Okay. So yeah, as I said earlier, if this set of people, like migrants, they are already in a miserable situation. If they are, like from, like a humble backgrounds, not so well-to-do, like families, or maybe from below poverty line and like things. Okay, they are already under like a lot of stress. They need to change their place of stay because of maybe some hostile conditions back home, maybe war, or maybe other like a discriminatory activities which may be going on in that place. Okay, so these people, this set of like a people must be supported. Well, more details, you can refer this link. Let's see some numbers. Before pandemic, income inequalities was falling in some countries. Gini index fell in 38 out of 84 countries, 2010 to 2017. The Gini index measures income inequality and ranges from 0 to 100, where 0 indicates that income is shared equally among all people, and 100 means it is not shared like among all people. Well, that graphic is incomplete over here. I don't know why. They should have checked. Yeah, COVID-19 implications. Well, that has, let's see what has happened. The most vulnerable groups are being hit hardest by the pandemic. Well, what are those groups? Like elderly people. We saw, like this, like a coronavirus, right? It was more fatal, for the elderly and people with comorbidity, like a conditions, right? So definitely it was, like the mortality rate for this, like a particular group was very high. Persons with disabilities, well, they find it difficult to cope up in the situations of short supply of resources, commodities and other like stuff. Okay, children, women and migrants and refugees. Yeah, since these are the most like vulnerable groups in any like a disaster situation. So in here also we are seeing like the impact is more on these groups. Global recession could squeeze development aid to developing countries. Yeah, resource flows for development. If you see, in 2017, it was 420 billion US dollars, and that got reduced to 271 US billion dollars in 2018. So this aid also, if you see, is kind of like getting impacted, and it is lowering, it is falling down. 54% of countries with data have a comprehensive set of migration policies. 54%. Close to half we can call. That means rest of the 46%, close to half, they do not have, like this proper, like a comprehensive set of migration policies, to handle, like such situations of crisis. Okay, so you see the like a magnitude of work which needs like to be done. Well, let's see some targets inside. By 2030, achieve and sustain income growth of the bottom 40% of the population. Improve regulation and monitoring of global financial markets and institutions. Facilitate orderly, safe, regular and responsible migration and mobility of people. By 2030, empower and promote the social, political and economic inclusion for everyone. Ensure enhanced representation and voice for developing countries in decision making in global, international and financial institutions. Implement the principles of spatial and differential treatment for developing countries. Eliminate discriminatory laws, policies and practices. Adopt policies, especially fiscal, wage and social protection policies, to progressively achieve greater equality. So the example we have seen earlier, like a same pay for like a same work, that is still not granted to like a some group of like a people like women and like a people from maybe disadvantaged like countries or like a disadvantaged or maybe economic like a level, right? So that also must end. That's the point. Encourage official development assistance and financial flow to states where the need is greatest. By 2030, reduce to less than 3% of the transaction cost for migrant remittances. Yeah, so if you see, a lot of these migrant, like a people, population, actually move to faraway places, or maybe they change their countries, like or the place of work, they go to other, like a places, and they send back, like some money to their, like a families in the form of remittances. Okay, so these international, like exchange, also kind of like takes away, like some percentage over here, right, as a transaction facility, to this whole transaction. So since these like people are already like belonging to like humble backgrounds, like a challenging situation, so ideally this percentage actually should reduce, like a very smaller like rate of transaction be levied on like this group. Well, so let's see some challenges. Income inequality is on the rise. The richest 10% is earning up to 40% of the total global income. That is the disproportionate, like a division we see. Whilst the poorest 10% can only earn between 2% and 7% of total global income. This requires the adoption of policies that empower the lower income earners, regardless of their sex, race and ethnicity. This is as per like report by Deloitte. Maybe you can refer Deloitte's like latest reports on such like a topics. The proposed conceptual framework for design of policies to address inequality. So this like you can see from the source, like what they have proposed. So there is like this system, by enclosed by this dotted line, where we see factor distribution, factor returns, and inside that we have population dynamics, technological change, globalization, skill premium, social norms and growth, etc., adding to the primary income distribution, because these are the things which like makes you earn, it kind of improves your value in the market, right? And in turn you make your living. Okay, so the better the like a capacity of individual like earning, the better the like a distribution of wealth is going to be till the like last person of the society. And this goes to the secondary income distribution, then tertiary income distribution. Here again there are taxes and transfers and public services, etc. So you can see this legend, this blue box is distribution, this is proximate determinant, drivers mentioned here, and policies in this green. So what is needed, if you see, macro policies, sectoral policies, social policies, trade policies, labor market policies, to handle like this bubble, this dotted bubble, because inside this bubble like things are changing and they carry potential to impact like the society and every individual.